Good evening and welcome to the October 4th, 2023 Litchfield School Board meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before we even get into review and revision of the agenda, we are jumping right in to go ahead and elect ourselves a vice chair. First, I guess I'd like to introduce, you've been introduced, but formally introduce and welcome to the board Matt Shoemaker, who has been sworn in and who has access to all the documents and has been coming up to speed really quickly on all of the issues that we have here. So welcome. And with the addition of a new board member, we've had the vice chair seat vacant since Ms. McDonald left. So I would like to open the floor to any nominations. Bueller? Okay, don't all volunteer at once, everybody. I mean, really. Anybody? A lot of crickets.
I mean, it's my first day, so.
Make a motion.
That's what you guys were doing, bring me in and put me in the middle of the fire. I mean, you've all been working together. None of you have any feeling about this?
Well, I'm happy to, I guess, put my hat in the ring. If I've been vice chair, I've been chair, I have the experience. You know, I've shown that I have the time. I'm happy to support our chair and work together on what needs to get done.
Are there any other?
I mean, I'm brand new. I would probably not want to be considered for that at this point. I think I have a lot to get brought up for.
Andrew, Peter, how do you guys feel? Either one of you want to be considered for it?
Personally, no.
All right, then I'll make a motion to nominate Christina Harrison. Given the overwhelming enthusiasm amount of people that are really trying for it at this point. So I'll make a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Again, any other nominations, I would want to have them out there on the floor so we can vote right after another as we did with chair in March. Seeing none, all those in favor of Christina Harrison as vice chair, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? So it passes.
Oh, I'll abstain.
3-0-2. No, 3-1-1.
3-1-1.
3-1-1. Oh my God, we can
It's
do
5
math.
now. We're back to 5.
Okay, 3-1-1. So congratulations,
Thanks.
or you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
One or the other. Moving on to review and revision of the agenda. Are there any things we need to notice?
I don't believe so. There were a couple of links that we told you would be updated yesterday, Monday actually, and they were, so.
Just for the board's awareness, there's nothing critical in it, but I did add a committee report for joint loss as I attended that meeting on behalf of Liz McDonald. So it's, again, nothing that needs to be discussed or looked at before tonight, but I just wanted you to know it was there, and I did add it this morning.
And
So
the
it's
same for budget committee and CIP. Updates have been added.
perfect.
And I added to facilities and reading reporting. Didn't have anything to report because we haven't met yet.
Okay. So in terms of, are there any items for the consent agenda that we wish to have put into old business so that we can discuss in more detail?
No.
Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and move forward into summary of non-public actions from September 20th, 2023. Ms. Ames made a motion to approve the September 6th, 2023 non-public session minutes. Ms. Harrison seconded the motion and the motion passed 4-0-0. Mr. Cutter made a motion to approve the request to hire a contracted service provider until the end of November. Ms. Harrison seconded the motion and the motion passed 4-0-0. Our student reps, Aiden and Alex, thank you, will be joining us, but after sports. And so with everyone's consent, I assume we can go back to student rep report once they get here. Moving into presentations and recognitions, we have the Litchfield Middle School, Principal Grantham. The floor is yours to present as you wish.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome, Mr. Shoemaker, to the board. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, because I have seen that there has been a post on social media, and I want to address all the components that I can from that post. There was an occurrence that happened on Monday, not today, but on Monday in the cafeteria. We were able to deal with it in real time. As it occurred, with Mrs. Thayer entering the cafeteria to handle the situation in real time as it occurred. And beyond that, once the video surfaced yesterday, we were able to address following all personnel recommendations. And beyond that, I really can't comment on the personnel matter that is at hand, but I just wanted to let folks know that it was handled in real time and we've addressed that. And I'm not wearing the shirt just because we believe it. I think that kindness matters across the board, and we want to make sure that all individuals in our school are handled in that way, where kindness matters, kid to adult, adult to kid, adult to adult. If we remember that across the board, then we won't have situations like that arising again. So start with the elephant in the room, and then we'll move on from there. So thank you for indulging me with that for just a moment. I don't follow the Litchfield, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I don't follow the Litchfield Moms page. I'm not on Litchfield What's Up. We have our school Facebook page, but Facebook really isn't the best way to address those concerns. And we had a couple of parents who absolutely reached out directly to us. I appreciate that. That's just really the best way to help resolve situations, is through direct communication, not through the side chains. So I just want to reiterate that as well. So we're here to talk about some really fantastic things. You see, I brought a bunch of my friends behind me here. We've had a fantastic start to the school year. Lots of really exciting things happening with our students and with our staff. We spent a great day today in our staff meeting really talking about what's been working really well. We discussed our Alice drill. We've discussed kind of how we're following that common language and common message across our building of common expectations from classroom to classroom, from place to place, hallway, cafeteria, forgive my froggy voice. But it's really about building that mantra of kindness matters. And I brought with me today part of our fantastic counseling team and our social emotional team, our mental health team. Emily McDonald is here kind of to just talk about how our team has changed and evolved a little bit this year. We have some new faces with us. We have some new positions that were part of our mental health team at the middle school. She's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing.
So my name is Emily McDonald. I'm currently the school counselor for our 6th and 7th graders. So how our school counselors work is we grow with the kids. So every year we stay with the same group, so we're in different grades. This year we have a new school counselor for our 5th and 8th grader. Her name is Kate Deschard. And she is wonderful. So thanks for approving that. Then we also have Jocelyn Bidricky. I have a really hard time with her last name. She's our school social worker, which is a position that we had already last year. Additionally, this year we have a mental health worker, Greg Pentazes, and he is fantastic too. It's really nice this school year that we have the 4 of us as a cohesive team, and we meet every day and we go over students that we're working with. So we are trying to shift things a little bit because we really want to push home the kindness matters to help decrease some of the behaviors that we're seeing, some of the CAF behaviors, hallway behaviors, bus behaviors, just kind of unkindness that's happening. We have so many wonderful students, and sometimes they get lost in the shuffle, and we don't want to lose any of those students. So we're definitely trying to really drive home Tier 1 supports and get out into the classrooms and collaborate with our students a lot more and our teachers. So there's lots of consultations that are happening throughout the day with our team and the teachers that we're working with. We're also going to start rolling out Tier 2 supports and doing small groups. As a team, we've talked a little bit how we're going to connect with the teachers to figure out because they're in the classrooms, they see that a lot more what the students' needs are. And then talking about different ways that we can make that happen to keep kids in their academic classes at because that's our priority at schools, to educate kids, right? Our hope is to help students develop the skills to be kind, and then also the skills to respond to people appropriately when they aren't getting kindness towards them. Does that make sense? Okay. And then, of course, we have our Tier 3 interventions, which is really great. When we have a student that where there's a student concern, Kate and I, as school counselors, we're kind of like the PCP of our department. So we take the information, we do a triage. If students need more in-depth support, we will refer them to our social worker or our mental health worker, and we'll reach out to parents to make sure parents know what's going on, because parents are the expert of their kids, right? So they need to know what's happening with their students, and they have the right to say no. That's always an option. So we are really clear with that. So we need to all partner together to make sure our students are successful.
Can you talk a little bit about what's coming with your Tier 1 supports and minute meetings?
Oh, yes. So this is my third year in our school district, and when I started, our prior counselor was on board with this, so we started doing minute meetings or mini meetings. So we go to best typically, so we're not pulling them out of core academics. And we'll meet with the students, and we have about 10 questions. And it's really just get a pulse of where the students are. Examples of those would be, can you rate your feel? We have a scale. Everyone has the same scale to look at, which is really helpful. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your feelings about the school year so far? Rate your feelings about how are things going with your friends right now? Rate your feelings on how life outside of school is going. And then, is there a trusted adult in the building? And if they feel comfortable, they can identify it. We also explain to the students when we having these minute meetings that if they don't want to participate, that's okay. If they're uncomfortable answering a question, they can say pass. In the past 2 years, I've had one student pass on questions, and then one student was not interested in sitting in a meeting with me at all, and that's totally fine. It's also a great opportunity for me to see and get eyes on the students, and just kind of connect with them and let them know that, like, I'm not scary. I think it can be a little intimidating, particularly for our 5th graders. Like, this is a whole new wild world. But we like to roll these meetings out in October time, so it gives the kids time to settle in and get to know the lay of the land a little bit before we start asking, like, how's school going so far? Otherwise, it's just scary sometimes, you know? So, any questions with those?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So the only other thing that we were going to chat about here today, thank you so much, Emily, I appreciate you, is the other big challenge that we are working on as part of LMS, and that's with, actually, Mr. Sulzin. You want to come up for a second, Mr. Sulzin? You're not on the list. Again, I'm putting you on the spot. Mr. Sulzin has taken over as our facilitator of student council, and this year we're working on merging together our student council and our C3PO. For those of you that aren't familiar with what C3PO stands for, it's about creating a culture and climate for positive outcomes. And we are trying to embody that and mean that in all we're doing. October is Bullying Awareness Prevention Month. It's a mouthful to say. We're not supporting bullying, we're supporting preventing bullying. And I think that in middle school, it's one of those places where we hear that on a daily basis, that situations are happening that could elevate to the level of bullying. And it's about, again, if kindness matters, no matter where we are, and we're seeing how we play a role in each of those parts. When we see unkind things happening, we see something, we say something. And C3PO has come up with a great project that we're working on together. And it's called the Cereal Box Challenge. I don't know if you've ever seen the video of schools that have collected cereal boxes full cereal boxes as part of a food drive, basically, and then kind of we're taking it and twisting it just a little bit. We're going to be donating all of those cereal boxes to the local food pantry. But in addition to that, we're going to use it as a giant Domino's set. So we're going to be taking, and hopefully, with great contributions from our community, which we're reaching out and hoping for, is having enough boxes to follow the hallways of LMS. The kids are really excited about making a video and kind of talking about how bullying prevention can be that domino effect. If we tip that first domino over and we all are part of that solution, the adults, students, and parents in our community, imagine that message that we can get across. In the same aspect, on the flip side, if you have a bullying situation that somebody tips that scale and the first few boxes fall over, if you're the person that puts the hand out to stop it, you're stopping bullying from happening. And what a powerful feeling that is to be that upstander, to be able to say to situations that are arising that happen every day, sometimes above the radar, sometimes under the radar, but we're able to put that stop to that bullying message. And it's just a visual that we're hoping to present to our kids, kind of doing it in a fun way. And Mr. Selzen has been fantastic with Mrs. Abney's back there too, and Mrs. Love, and Mr. Frazier, Mrs. Thayer. We're all working together as a school community to make that happen. So if you are at home, even if you don't have kids at LMS, we love your cereal boxes, because the more we have, we just think that would make a great message. And if, again, it's a community coming together to help make sure that positivity is coming forward. Do you have anything else I'm missing? I called you up, but I did all the talking.
That's
Sorry.
okay. That was pretty much it. Just a friendly face for you.
You're a friendly face. You're awesome. Thank you for being kind. You're coming
welcome.
up. Do you have any questions about anything else on the board report? Anything else that you wanted to know about?
Questions from anyone on the board?
No, thank you. I
Thank
like the
you.
cereal box domino challenge. I think that's fantastic. It's a good message.
So-
It ties back into what we talked about. at
I was
the
gonna
district
say,
kickoff.
you
Yeah.
should get some dominoes to hand those out,
Yeah.
as was handed out. I'm sure you're on it.
We have a top secret mission that I cannot divulge yet, but there is a top secret it's not just C3PO and us working on this. It is a school-wide multi club impact. I cannot,
Sounds
again,
fascinating.
top secret. When it is real, you'll see pictures, you'll see what's going on.
Got it.
The last thing I wanted to talk about is the links in the loop. I'm hopeful, we heard messages that it was difficult to open. I'm hopeful with last week's iteration, that it was a little easier to read on a phone setting. I didn't get any feedback whatsoever, other than that they could be quickly opened. But if anybody has feedback that they'd prefer the blog version versus the picture version, or the picture version versus the blog version, please don't hesitate to reach out and give that feedback, because we want to make sure you're getting the information in a timely manner. That's the most important. I know it's different than what GMS and CHS is doing, but when I came in 2 years ago, that was one of the things that people were like, oh, this is great because it's quick and it's a visual and you can see the photos of the kids. We're trying to get that in. Don't forget to get your Power School information updated. We still have a few that haven't, so we've seen less pictures of kids, because I hate posting those pictures and having to slap a sticker over a student's face, but we want to make sure we're honoring not posting pictures of families that prefer not to have their kids out there. Thank you so much.
Just on the reading and math data that's in your report,
Yes,
anything to highlight there?
The reading and math data, this is our first toe dip, so this is based on our fall data. One of the things that we are spending a lot of time, and we will be spending half of our day on Friday doing, is taking a look at not only the iReady data, but taking a look at, as we've discussed previously at previous board meetings, taking a look at how that iReady data matches or doesn't match our SAS data, and what we as teachers, iReady is going to be coming in to kind of help facilitate some of that conversation and talk about next steps, because it's great to have all this data and have all this information, but now what do we do with this data to help our students' learning improve? What kind of instruction do we have? We have teachers that are working unbelievably hard on an everyday basis to build lessons and activities that are engaging to students, that get them involved, that get them to want to be in school. I know middle school is a tough place. It's where we go through a lot of changes. And I think that making sure that kids are engaged in that learning is one of our primary goals, but that learning is also rigorous and vigorous, that they're able to get the content and the concepts that they need to be successful moving forward in the next grade. So we're going to be taking a look at that as part of what we're doing on Friday. So we have some work to do. But again, this is one snippet in time. This is not the picture of what we see overall on a day-to-day basis. Our reading scores look better than our math scores right now, and we continue to have work to do in both areas.
I was impressed by the amount of green for the beginning of the school year on the reading.
So I'm gonna be
no.
Debbie Downer on that one. The first three on that reading component are tested out skills. So those are skills that hopefully by 5th grade, all of our students should be well above grade level on phonics, phonological awareness, and high frequency words. Those first three concepts. So,
But even in the next three,
Yep.
you can see the ones below it with the summary data.
Absolutely.
There's still a fair amount. So.
absolutely. And I think that, we as a team, as a school, are looking at that data. It doesn't mean that we stink at what we're doing. It doesn't mean that we're not trying very hard. It doesn't mean that what we're doing isn't right. We just want to make sure that what we're doing is helping to meet our students' needs and kind of taking a look at where that data and information is overall. Our teachers and our students are working hard, and we're going to continue to work hard to see, hopefully, when we talk to you in June about the data looking better. It's a process, though. It's not going to be a snap. You're going to see magical scores jumping thousands of points in 1 or 2 years. It's going to take some time for that rebound to happen, but it's something we're putting conscious energy and effort in to make sure that we are seeing that rebound, because we know our kids and our community are capable of supporting that. Learning is important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're good to move on? All right, it is now time for community comment on agenda items. So I would like to open the floor to that. Public comments, we would ask, are limited to 3 minutes a person. And these are on the agenda items. So if anyone is here to provide community comment, come on up, identify yourself. Bueller? And no. Okay, I am going to go ahead and close community comment. Thank you for that comment. Moving on to correspondence. So last time for me to do this, but it's quicker than last time. So I'm going to briefly run through it.
Can you share that with me, that template
Yes.
with me?
Yep. On September 20th, Mr. Mitchell, GMS principal, circulated to the board the GMS conditions documents with data regarding the hot and humid weather days. On September 20th, Ms. Patton, the GMS teacher, let the board know that she is running a marathon for Boston Children's Hospital, and good luck to her. On September 21st, Dr. Jetty sent an email and copied the board to Mr. Leary, Board of Selectmen Chair, asking if he is going to attend the GMS forum on the 27th. On September 22nd, Gail Behringer, a community member, sent an email agreeing with the decision to send a survey to parents that are sending their children to private school, but had a concern about the superintendent's response to that. On September 22nd, Heidi Ames emailed the board circulating information from outside agencies that conduct superintendent searches for board awareness. On September 22nd, Jan Sullivan emailed to the board circulating draft September 20th, 2023 public minutes. On September 25th, Ms. Widman, curriculum director, I know it's a longer title than that, but I just made it smaller for that purpose, circulated, letting the board know that she would be having a Litchfield curriculum meeting, also known as, or formerly known as PERC, on Wednesday, 9/27. On September 25th, Mr. Polanski emailed to the board members regarding the prior minutes and withdrawing his amendments to the, I think it was the August 16th minutes. On September 25th, Heidi Ames copied the board and emailed a community member regarding a board response to a variance request. On September 25th, Dr. Jetty emailed the board regarding the need to resolve the August 16th minute issue, and there were responses from Mr. Cutter and Dr. Jetty. On September 29th, Ann Inamorati emailed the board circulating manifest supporting documents. On September 29th, Mr. Mitchell emailed the community members and copied the board, thanking them, those that attended the GMS tour and the forum. There was a response from Ms. Ruggles, a community member. On September 29th, Kayla Collins emailed to the board circulating the principal's report, the financial report, and the agenda for the October 4th meeting. Also on September 29th, Mr. Mitchell emailed to the staff and copied the board, thanking them for attending and giving tours for the GMS forum, and their comments afterwards. Dr. Jetty responded to that. On October 2nd, Christina Harrison emailed the board requesting feedback on the NHSBA resolutions and bylaw changes that are proposed. On October 3rd, Kayla Collins emailed the board circulating the Google invite for the board meeting this evening with a response from Mr. Plansky and Ms. Collins. And on October 3rd, Andrew Cutter made a comment on the agenda, which was circulated as an email for board to review the CIP actions that happened at the October 2nd meeting. And that brought us up to about noontime today. See, short and sweet. Moving on to general business, we have the superintendent's report.
Yeah, so a couple of reports that are critical at this time of year. So remember that enrollment is something that we watch all year long, but the October 1st number is the one that really matters. That's the one that gets uploaded to the state. Our adequacy money is based upon that number, and it really is the number that's the most accurate, because as we track students who are moving in and moving out, October 1st is sort of that period where somebody's registered in another school if they've moved, or they've completed their registration with us. So this is the one that really matters. And this year, of course, it's the October 2nd number because October 1st was a Sunday. So we're going to track it on Monday. And if you take a look at the first sheet that's provided to you, you can see that our numbers pretty much landed where we thought they were going to, going back to August. We're not a district with a highly transient population. Our numbers are relatively stable and relatively predictable. A couple of things to note is that Campbell is a little bit smaller than it was at the beginning of the year. And you can look at the move-in, move-outs by grade level that are reported for you, but Campbell is at 382 students. So it's the first time that we've been under 400 students in quite a long time. But that is a continuing trend down. And if you look at the actual numbers, you'll see that with 115 seniors preparing to graduate and with 89 eighth graders, it's going to continue. We're going to continue to see a decline at Campbell. At the middle school, back in August, we were at 354. We ended up at 351. So again, relatively predictable. The one number that has increased for us is the GMS number. And that was at 440, predicting, we had 36 pre-K students at that time. We're now up to 446. So Dan and the staff at GMS have seen more of the move-in than the other two schools have. If you work your way across the remainder of the tabs on that sheet, you can see how that compares at each school. So Dan updated his numbers as of 10/2, and Jen updated her numbers as of 10/2. Campbell has not done an update, but I actually didn't ask Dan or Jen to do one. So I was okay with the 15th number, but the Campbell numbers are also relatively stable at this point in time. So I'm going to pause on the reality for a second and see if you have any questions or observations that you want me to look into relative to those numbers.
Any questions? Seeing none?
All right, so the next sheet to take a look at is the projection sheet. This one I'm going to actually project. Does somebody have
The projections?
because I do think the public may want to follow along with this, so I'll get it up on the screen so we can see, and then if there's a question, because this is where we are now moving into operationalizing what are we going to do next year as we are preparing the budget, and that takes on twofold, right? So we're predicting supply needs based upon what our student population is, but we're also taking a look at our staffing needs and making a prediction about what we're going to need relative to staffing in the schools.
Oscar, are we projecting this? Sorry, I just want to make sure the screen's being projected. I can't see the TV. Thank you.
Yep. And so this chart actually goes back quite a ways, but we don't show all the data because the most pertinent data is the most recent data. So this begins in the 2018-19 school year, and you can see what our populations were then. We then work our way down to what did we predict this time last year. So using the model, what were we predicting our numbers would be, and then on October 1st, what were they actually, right? So if we take a look, we were predicting that in K through 4, we would have 382 students at Griffin. We actually ended up with 405. So that's the number that was off the most, but we clearly have seen the most move-ins. Younger families are arriving. And if you look at it, the number that is most volatile is the kindergarten number. And we if you trace this back to the beginning, and that's why I started at the 18-19 year, because that was the first year of full-day K, 81, 76, 65, 82, 66, 71. There's just a fluctuation that's taking place in the kindergarten number that is very difficult to predict. And that's the reality of it, because that's the first time they enroll and come to us. So as the board knows, we begin the process of encouraging people to register early, and it still ends up being a moving target for us. And if somebody has an idea of how to make that better, I would love to hear the idea, because that is a challenging number for us to zero in on. At the middle school, we were predicting that we would be at 348, and we came in at 351, so pretty close. We were off by 3 students there. And at the high school, we were predicting 394, and we came in at 382. So that was off by a little bit higher number, but it was a loss at the high school and a gain at the elementary, relatively similar. So what do we do with those numbers? So the next 3 rows are the yellow rows, which are taking a prediction based upon what we've seen and saying, what do we think we're going to have moving forward? And we can predict out 3 years, and it's all tied in the spreadsheet to the models that are underneath it. So we simply are looking at what change did we actually observe 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and this year. What's the average change, and then what's the impact that we would predict based upon that change. So it's all tied together through a formula to come up with a prediction. Looking at that part of the spreadsheet, you can see that K and 1 are the volatile numbers, right? So we've been averaging +6 and +8 in those 2 grades, and then in 2nd grade it's 0, 3rd grade is +1, and 4th grade is +3. So it gets a little bit more stable after the kindergarten 1st grade year. So those continue to be the grade where we will either have somebody who's in a private kindergarten and then comes to us in 1st grade, or predicting what we're going to have in kindergarten. It's been that roller coaster. But going across the rest of the board, the numbers are far more predictable. And let me just go back, because I didn't say it, but if you look at Griffin, we're actually predicting that it's going to continue to increase slightly. So the Griffin number is going to continue to go up. I would be remiss if I didn't state to the board, they're already maxed out on space. And when we add another class, we don't know where we're going to add that other class. We may need to look at bringing another portable in as a possibility to absorb some of the space. We've had conversation about whether we could locate specific programs in other buildings that the district already owns. So we're getting as creative as we can at trying to figure out what to do, but the reality is that the numbers are getting higher at Griffin, and we're already maxed out. The middle school is predicted to stay relatively stable, 351, 344, back to 348, back to 345. So we're sort of settling in with our middle school number based on this model. And the high school continues to see a pretty sharp decline. So you've got the 382 that we currently have, dipping down to 349 next year, dipping down to 331 the year after, and then settling out kind of in that 335-ish range is where we're currently predicting the high school to be. If you work your way down to the next yellow part, this is what is our current projection on what to do at each grade level. And I want to draw your attention to preliminary conversation at Griffin, because this is the one to keep an eye on. Based on what we've seen, I think we should be budgeting for that 5th kindergarten, because we've had it the last 2 years. And it seems as if that number is settling in above the trigger number that requires that. And so keeping that position in the budget appears to be the wise move at this point. We also, because of the size of the current kindergarten, we're predicting that we're going to need that 5th teacher in the 1st grade, which would be a +1, because we currently have 4. So it's keeping the 5th in kindergarten, adding a 5th teacher in the 1st grade. We do not predict that we would need the 5th teacher in the 2nd grade, so that would be a -1. That's an offset. But then it's offset as you go into 3rd grade, where we need a +1 again. So I'm not sure which offset it is, But either way you look at it, it's a +1 and keeping the kindergarten, which is almost like a +2. The LMS numbers are stable with the current enrollment, and the class size guide calculation is there. The largest average class size would be 7th grade at almost 24. There would be some classes of 24, and it would be a little bit smaller in the 8th grade with a class size of 20. And the last thing I would just point out to the board, if you click the NHSAA projections, we paid for a study. So the study was done, 2 years ago, I believe. So we looked, they ran 5 different models. So they have the 5-year average, the 3-year weighted, a 1-year cohort. They run the model average, where they do an average of the 3 models that they've run. And then we have our model, the Litchfield model. And so I was taking a look at what we were projecting to where we actually landed. And it seems as if our model's not that bad. We're in the same ballpark. The 5-year average model seems to be the most predictable. So the deviation for that model is more accurate than any other model. So we ended up at 1138 this year in K through 12. They were predicting 1131. We were predicting 1124. So we're doing pretty well at making a prediction. Again, not having a highly transient population, it makes it easier for us to make those projections. And of course, the nagging thing is always, every time I drive by the old horse farm, there's another unit going up. It's like getting bigger. And so we have to keep in mind that there are some unpredictable things happening in town just as a result of developments. So I'll pause there and see what questions or comments the board might have relative to the projections that we're running.
So I know that I've heard that some of these models take into account vacant land that could be developed. At least I thought I heard that. I don't know if that's accurate or not.
So these models do not take that into account.
Okay.
So the vacant land, so I think the National Regional Planning, I think they have like a build-out model, and they would say that if all the land in Litchfield got developed, they would predict the population to go to 10,000 people. Or I've heard a number like that, right? So
Yeah, that's the number, 10,300, if every piece of land was built out.
10,300
People.
residents in town. And then you can take that and say, based on a 10,300 population, what would we predict the impact would be on students? And it gets trickier at that level because, a 2-bedroom rental apartment is very different than a 4 or 5-bedroom home. So you have to really start to parse out how to predict what the impact would be on the schools. So these models are based on what we currently see using existing housing models only. They're not predicting that. That's one more thing we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to find a way to, it seems like some of the feedback that I'm seeing is around these type of projections, right? And I think it's really important that we get these things right, because ultimately when we look at planning for space and staffing and all of those things, if we get it wrong and we spend wrong now, as we've seen in the past, it comes back and costs a lot more money in the future. And so I don't know if there's a way to, at least try to get those numbers so that they are something that people can take into account. Because as we've seen, like, the development has blown up, right? And I know that you're saying, obviously a 2-bedroom apartment changes things, but more supply can reduce the prices, which could then, cause more people to come into the town in some of the other homes, right?
We do have a spreadsheet going where we are tracking the different construction areas in terms of how far they've proceeded in terms of the planning board and whatnot. We have an idea of how many units they are, the size, when they'll be finished. So we are tracking that, but I mean, the question mark is who moves into those? Is it
Right.
more of a retired couple without any kids? Is it, a couple with a young child who's gonna go through the school district? We don't know.
And we'll start to see that obviously with some of these,
That's the
right?
whole-
And maybe we
yeah.
can make some predictions based off of
Yep.
what we see as like the horse farm development,
Yeah.
finishes up.
Let me share that spreadsheet, because we took a look at, like, the Kalawa Circle development and said, okay, we can go in and say who lives on that road, and the impact was actually relatively minimal. There was not a huge impact. And then that development felt very similar to the horse farm development. So we said, here's what we would predict would be the impact if it stays the same.
Right.
But you're also looking at a different market now, and you don't know who will say, you know, we can get by with a two-bedroom place, where before somebody would say, I don't want a two-bedroom place. Now people might be more, so all of that is the unpredictability.
Well, and I don't think we're gonna get it perfect, but I guess the question is, like, if you look at these numbers in isolation, right, we're not talking about huge changes in the numbers, but when you take that into account, given, for example, like you just pointed out, GMS, where there's literally no space, right? 10 students might make a difference, right? And I think that's hard to sometimes equate when you're looking at numbers on paper, because looking at these, they're unimpressive in the grand scheme of, like, you're not filling a football field of kids with this, but if you don't have enough room for 10 more kids, then that does become problematic. And likewise, people have brought up the, you know, aspects of, like, the high school population declining, right? But then we have to continue to look backwards to see, you know, at some point, are we gonna have to refill that space, right? Because there's questions about, like, okay, if that's declining, do you reallocate that space? But how long do you really have to really?
And
handle
can
those
you
things?
reallocate that space? Because is it the appropriate size? Is it the appropriate?
Oh, of course, there's a
you know?
million other considerations that I
Yeah.
think make it inappropriate, like possibly inappropriate, but, you know, at least addressing
Yeah.
those pieces, it's interesting looking
Definitely.
at this.
I think the interesting thing for me is actually just taking a reflection and going back in time, right? So if you click the 2020 tab, right, just as a point of reference, you'll have the history from 2007 forward, right? And if we just look at the 10-year, from row 12, which is the year 2012 and 2013, we had 1,478 kids, right? And compare that to what we have now of, what is it, 1,179, and you're at, what, 300 kids less,
Right.
right? So there has been, and we continue to experience, a decline.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, looking at these projections, it looks like it will start to level off and be fairly consistent starting in 2025-ish.
Right, and then I know Kyle Barker has done his own analysis, because
Right.
during facilities, we've been talking about what kind of space do we need? You know, how much space is really lacking at GMS? And he's projecting, based on his own resources, and his own, you know, study with the numbers for other districts as well, that, we're going to see an increase. Like, it's kind of plateaued at this point, and then it will go back up as, you know, now the millennial generation is having more kids than, you know, the generation previously. So we'll begin to see an upward trend.
Yeah, I mean, what's hard for me to square up with those numbers, because that's a good point that you just brought up, Andrew. What's hard for me is, you know, working in real estate, to see the number of people that are moving here from out of state, right? From especially Massachusetts, moving up north. So it's really like, I can't make sense in my head of what I've experienced working in that industry versus these numbers. It just doesn't make sense. But so I don't know what the discrepancy.
But if you go back and when we think about capacity within the buildings themselves, right? I mean, we've had capacity, just looking at this data, to support 1,650 kids within the buildings. that we have.
So I mean, how is that possible? Right? Because we're talking through, that's a lot of kids
Because
difference.
the little kids
Yeah.
are the ones that's growing. The other ones are all shrinking.
That's 500 kids difference, right? But I mean, I think it's a blend of looking at the shifting between schools, right? Where, you know, Campbell, back in 2007-8, had 578 kids in that building, and now there's 439. You can move an entire class into Campbell and still be less than what we had in 2007.
So in 2007,
Entire grade, I should say.
right, so in 2007, just looking at the most, you know, the highest number on here for elementary, right, it was 486.
Yeah.
And that's without any kindergarten.
Oh, and that's without kindergarten, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's,
All right.
I mean,
Right.
that's the big
Okay.
thing. That was based off, if you look at the
Right,
first
yep, I
grade,
see that,
second
yep.
grade, third grade class, that was 486 kids. I assume the class sizes were much, much, much higher than what we are striving for these days.
Yeah.
I also assume the student population and the needs of that population was very different in 2007 compared to what it is in 2023.
But even in middle school, right? 556 kids back then, and now there's, what is it, 351? Right, that's a significant.
Grade 5 was in portables. Now they're inside the building.
True. Yeah, true. Yeah, you're right, it's a lot to think about.
But I think a point that I look at is 578 at Campbell. Now, the building, the core was built for 600. You had 173 ninth graders that year. I mean, that's huge. We're now looking at classes 80 to 90, right? So it's quite a shift just in terms of who's arriving. But compare the 578 to the 486, right? So it was older, it was families with older students, and now it's the opposite. The numbers are at the elementary, and they will continue to stay in the system. I mean, that can predict that. But it's not the same, it's not going to reach 173 ninth graders again.
Not unless everybody who moves into those apartments and condos is bringing kids with them.
Right.
Multiple kids.
And the other is, what we know is there are a lot of empty bedrooms in town. There are people the people whose children graduated have empty bedrooms. They're for the grandkids to come over and stay, or visitors to visit. You know, so at some point, they'll start to sell, and that could shake this up. But it's not going to be an onslaught, I don't think. It'll be a slower.
I think I've said this before, in our neighborhood, we've had like 3 houses sell in the 25 years we've been there.
Yeah.
You know, there's still a bunch of the originals that are there.
Any other questions or comments on enrollment and report and projections?
Oh, good stats, thank you.
My only other point is just keep an eye on that class size. We're gonna need the board to advise us. And our admin team still needs to flush that out, right? So this is a calculation that was shared on Monday of our current reality, and now we've got a ton of work to do relative to the budget on it. But it certainly is impacting our thinking about GMS.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Last thing is I just wanted to report out. So Doug and I spent two days last week at the Business and Operations Conference that was put on by the various state associations. So it's the School Business Administrators Association, the Superintendents Association. Good conference. Had an opportunity to hear some good speakers and get some decent updates about what is going on around the state there. And then today I was at the law conference. There were a significant number of new bills that have passed, and we were just getting an update on the impact of those. And it's interesting to watch 3 lawyers in a room. We have 2 in our room now, but it's interesting to watch 3 lawyers in the room having an outward dialogue about what they think it means, because some of this stuff is so fresh and new, it hasn't really been fleshed out in case law and what is the real impact. So, we can read the literal words, we can try to implement that, but there's still work to be done relative to what the impact is going to be on us. So, and I never leave a law conference with less anxiety. I always leave with more anxiety because I just listen to it and I go, holy cow. Yeah, and Jen, and it was interesting, the principals went to a law conference back in August, July, and they left with heightened anxiety, and then superintendents in the session today were saying, what did you tell the principals? Because they came back all tanked up. And so, but the guidance from the state that was promised it would be out on August 6th still hasn't been published yet. So again, we're flying and trying to find our way through this without having the official guidance yet. So we'll continue to do that.
Anything that was raised in terms of key new legislation bills that are top of mind for you?
So top of line was really relative to thinking about restraint and seclusion and the way we deal with disruptive students in the school. Definitely the law is shifting toward making sure that the student is supported in a way that doesn't have them feel ostracized or punished or what have you. So that's something that we have to continue to figure out how to get right. I would say, going back to the last session, we were looking at building aid. That was a session that was really important to me, that we understand where we are with building aid and what's on the horizon with building aid. So that was a really important session to attend. Doug, did you have other thoughts from what you attended?
No, the state has hired somebody who's very good with Excel. So I think we're going to start to see some more reports that come out where it's going to be easier to compare ourselves to other towns in the state as well. So those reports are kind of in their infancy now. So I don't know, it's not necessarily a next week type of thing, but as the year progresses, they should be releasing some reports, which then we can share with the school board, with the community, which will kind of help us make a little bit more sense of our numbers, because whenever you can compare numbers, it makes more sense.
To some.
To some, good point. Yeah, it just adds more numbers to other people, so.
Another hot topic for me today, and so here's one of my aha moments. So we're dealing with the civil rights issue of gender identity, and that's at the forefront, right? So this is an emerging thought and emerging impact on athletics, emerging impact on day-to-day operation in schools. And the attorney began with, you never said to somebody, prove your religion, right? You never said, prove that you're Jewish, Catholic. But yet, that seems to be the reaction that many people are having to gender identity, and we need to just move to the point of, this is how I identify. And I just thought, oh, wow, that was a powerful moment for me of, that is a civil right. It's carved into law. It's a constitutional right, and we have to be accepting. And it's a place where kindness matters, without a doubt. And so it was just sort of interesting, because when somebody uses a bathroom that somebody else perceives as not the right bathroom to be using, and we get into this prove it matter, and they were saying, no, it's a civil right. That person has the ability to identify. And it was really an interesting conversation in the room. And then just take it to the next step of impact on Title IX with athletics and so forth. It's really it's an interesting area of the law that is continuing to develop, and one that we're going to continue to have on the forefront for us.
All right, all set with superintendent's report?
I am.
All right, moving on to business and operations report. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Totten, for the first meeting of the month update.
Yeah, so first meeting of the month, the only thing that really changes on the financial is the transfers. You can see there was a couple more transfers that went through, all less than $5,000. I would like to talk a little bit about electrical rates, because I'm starting to be in communication with who our shopper is. They shop multiple places for us for those rates. As we look back at what we have been paying, so from December 21 to December 22, we paid 11.2 cents per kilowatt hour. So with it being a building, a school, which it's different how the bill gets made up than, say, our house. There's a lot more demand charges. There's a lot more areas that get added up to the final bill as well. So the supply side is part of it, but then it's met with, demand during peak hours, and that all plays into the bill as well. Then for the next year, so from December 22 to December 23, so which we're in right now, like a lot of people, we went up to 16.99 cents. So that's what we're currently in. Last year, there was a lot of distress around the electrical rates and where they could end up. Part of that being the war in Ukraine that brought Europe into more of a tailspin with their energy. And we started shipping over as much natural gas as we could. Natural gas is one of the leading ways to make electricity. So that seemed to have kind of spiked, because in that fear, though, we did go from December 2023 to May of 24. We locked in at 17.3 cents because we just didn't know where we were going to be.
Right.
And no one felt comfortable with possibly being 30 or 40 or 45 cents at that point. So as we look at the next several years, if we go back before December of 21, you could find rates of 7 cents, 8 cents, 6 cents per kilowatt hour. The going thought is that those times are not to be expected in the next 5 years. Ukraine and Europe is a big part of that, but also is the fact that there's just more things being powered by electricity, cars and other things. So we can get a contract of 11.5 cents or a little bit less than that. We can have a choice whether we lock in for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So just want to kind of float that out there, get some people's opinions on that.
11, I'm on the energynh.gov site. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's where you can shop various suppliers as a residential rate, right? But there are also commercial options on there as well. 11.5 is, I can say it seems about average from what I'm seeing. There are some higher, there's a couple lower. So I think ballpark, that's probably about right
Yep.
with current times.
So I know when I last checked for my own self, it was like 13 cents, and that was like a couple weeks ago, so.
Yeah, there's a few of them that are 14, a couple of them 13, right? There's some that are 10, fairness, right? But
So the question is for how long? though?
For how long? We're already locked in through May of '24. You know, as we go into budget season, it's a lot easier to go into budget season with a number, especially if we think it's gonna be more on the lower side.
And
of
how
what we're
long
gonna
was
get.
the term options?
We could do 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and they're all right around a little bit less than 11.5 cents.
I
So
mean,
there's not a big fluctuation between, sometimes there's a bigger fluctuation. If you sign 3 years, it might have been like at 9.5 cents, but we're not seeing that through the multiple companies that they're out
my
shopping
view
with.
is 3 year and just lock it in. I mean, I can't imagine it's going down tremendously from that over the next several years. I mean, I think
The only
that's,
time there might be a change is if there's a change in the administration and developing our own power.
Right, and how quickly would that even be implemented?
Yeah, to
right?
take effect.
So the recommendation from the person was 3 years as well, just knowing where things are and where they're, with inflation and with the demand of electricity just continue to climb as there's more incentives for electric cars and other things like that, so. But,
that would be my thought.
I would,
Comfortable
I would
with
agree.
3 year?
okay, so we'll look to get 3 years at something less than 11.5 cents.
9.5 is great.
Yeah, seriously.
7 would be
I
better.
got back to him, I'm like, where's our 8 cents? And he's like, yeah, those times, those
Those are all
those are
the,
gone. So, all right, great, thanks.
any questions for Mr. Totten? I am gonna make sure we're circulating the manifest, for signatures, but, so if we can just keep that moving. Matt needs to still probably meet with Doug before you have
I'm
to-
not signing that.
Yeah. Good boy. Moving on to public minutes, we have the August 16th, 2023 minutes, and then we have the September 20th, 2023 minutes. Are there motions to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the August 16th minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the August 16th, 2023 minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? It passes 500.
You should abstain.
I watched all of them. Oh, I can't do there's non-public. I'll abstain. Sorry.
This was public minutes,
just
though.
public.
Oh, that's just
Yeah.
public minutes?
Okay.
I watched all of them.
Just a little background TV.
Well, when I knew that we were gonna have to talk about it, I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify for Jan?
Yep.
What number is she typing?
500.
500.
Thank you.
Yep. And then, is there a motion to approve the September 20th minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the September 20th public minutes.
Second, any questions? Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the September 20th, 2023 public minutes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Aye.
So it'll be 401.
Threw me off on that one.
And who abstained?
I didn't go back and watch
Didn't
all
watch that one?
He didn't go back and watch that one. All right, moving back to, or into old business, we have the discussion on the community forum. So, I guess what are people's thoughts? Did you want to direct that conversation?
No, I was curious. I mean, first of all, I want to thank the board members for being there that night. I think the public provided us with some really good feedback. I purposefully stayed quiet and kind of on the side to listen and capture thoughts on it. I think nobody can do the tour better than Dan and his staff, and they did a great job that night.
They did.
But
They did.
I'm just curious what other thoughts or things really got punctuated for members of the board.
I thought it was great to get to go through that. I was disappointed in the turnout. particularly having followed since that, what's the discussions are publicly about the project and the need for the project. I'm kind of at a loss for the people that are questioning the need for the project or questioning the viability of renovating the building or alternatives, seeing them continue to reiterate points that we are trying so desperately to address over and over and over again, is discouraging. I think that if you feel strongly about this or you have any opinion about this whatsoever, it's been offered that even if you can't make it to one of these, like, we'll set up time for you to come see it. I don't know how else to get that point across. I do think that the gentleman who brought up the point about getting out to the people who would obviously support this but probably don't come out, like the people with young kids that will be in the schools coming up who have a vested interest in this. I think it is important for us to consider that moving forward. I liked that idea of going out to the soccer fields and stuff like that. But, again, I think that, and I'm starting to doubt whether some of these people that are chiming in these public forums are even watching the meetings, so this may be falling on deaf ears. But if you are watching the meetings and you're not coming to these things and you're sharing uninformed opinions online, I think it's important to come out and actually become informed. So.
I think this was talked about at the meeting. There are people who are staunchly for and staunchly against. And I saw a bunch of comments of people who were on the against and had what they had to say. And all the people that said, I want the school, I know how bad it is, I didn't need to go to the forum.
Right.
So it's that middle class, right? It's like winning a presidential election. There's 20% in the middle that we got to win.
But
I agree with you on that, Peter. I think, though, that when the people who are staunchly against repeatedly comment with misinformation or incorrect information or think that we haven't done our due diligence, that casts more distrust in those middle of the line people. So I think it's our responsibility and the supporters of the project's responsibility to counter that misinformation with facts and direct them to where you can find that information. Yes, we did look into renovation. We did look into consolidation. There are reasons we ruled those things out, and so updating the Reimagining GMS website is going to be key.
I think, Erica Ruggles had some great points about how that should be organized in her email, and I really agreed with that a lot.
Yeah.
Even if FAQ page, I am hearing that a renovation is an option. Why isn't it an option?
Yeah.
Or what has been done to look into this option?
Right.
And spelling it out. I've heard that,
With
whatever.
the slides and what the conclusions we've come to and why, what were the pros and cons for that option, and why did at the community forums, did we as a community decide, no, that's not a viable option, that's not the best option for us.
In our project meeting on Monday, we took a look at that website, and Kyle also shared the Monadnock site. So Monadnock passed the consolidation elementary project. And so we have their website to take a look at, and we'll pull ideas from there that make sense. So expect an overhaul on that sooner than later, because I think that has to become the one-stop shopping.
Agreed. I think that needs to be the link that we say, that is not true, go to this website, and here's where the correct information
And that
is.
website, just to do the plug, is on the litchfieldsd.org website at the bottom where it says Reimagine GMS. You'll see a picture of GMS. It'll take you right there with all the materials.
Yep. Yeah, but it does require some digging and some reading of, it's not a.
Takes
it's not
some
a-
effort.
It's not a quick glance and see, oh, I was wrong on that. It definitely takes some effort, so if we can clean that up and,
But
make
within
it
3
easier to
clicks,
access.
I mean, really, within 3-4 clicks, you're at where you need to be.
Yeah, but as we're seeing, there are a
People who are
large
not
number of
making it
people
that
that don't even want to do one click. So 3 or 4 clicks may be problematic.
Right. Right.
Especially for some of the, more pertinent information for them.
I think too, the site was designed 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, it
And
was.
so
We've
we
done a lot
we
of
need
work
to
in
come back at it now and say, like, the FAQ should be on the landing page. That should be right there when you see it. The video, the most telling video should be on the landing page. So somebody can watch that video and not go to the video tab and then have to pick among videos. It's like, which one do we really want to
Yeah,
promote?
which one do you
Put it right there,
Yeah.
right? So we can clean that up. That's easy to make those adjustments.
I also think it's important for maybe Dan and a couple of staff members to do the tour that he gave, with someone recording that tour the whole way. So that can be posted, because there were people that said, oh, I'd be interested in seeing that, but I couldn't make it that night. And so, again, who is better to tell the story than Mr. Mitchell and his staff?
And maybe some hotspot pictures, right? Like, one thing that was really powerful, I think, for most of the people that were there was the teacher that showed a picture of the Petri dish that grew mold just from being exposed to the air in her classroom, right? That's what they're breathing in. So I know for the parents that are thinking about sending their kids there, the ones that had
That's
young kids that
concerning.
are not there yet, basically said, I have to think twice about whether I want to actually send my kids to this district after seeing that,
Yep.
if this isn't addressed. And I think just going back to some of the misinformation, I think every person here is open to having conversations about accurate things, even if they're not favorable to a new project, right? I feel that way personally. Like, I like hearing counterpoints to, well, maybe, that's how you end up with a solution that you're not going to regret in 30 years. I think that's really important, but it's really hard to have those. We can't get to those conversations because all we do is just look at misinformation and have to correct the misinformation over and over and over again. So, again, I think come get the data. If you have a good point, like, that's great. Let's talk about it.
I thought it was pointed commentary, but it was necessary commentary. When the gentleman said, he arrived at the community forum and nobody greeted him, nobody introduced themselves, and I think we're finding our way through this, right? But we need greeters at the door. Churches have this down. You don't walk into a new church and not have somebody introduce themselves and say who they are. And we need to do the same thing, right? And frankly, if these are board community forums, we need the board to take that extra initiative. Because, Dan he's making sure that Janine's ready to head down there and that, this is in place and so forth. So, as the guy was saying that, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I said hi to him in the
felt bad.
lobby.
Yeah.
I did too.
kept-
It was embarrassing.
It was like,
It was a great point, but it was embarrassing.
He's right, it's sales 101.
Yeah.
Right.
We should never do that again. That was like, holy cow, we need to know going into a forum.
I realize, yeah,
Agreed.
agreed.
Hindsight 2020. And good feedback. Good
Right.
feedback
We
for
learn
us.
from it and do better next time.
Implement it.
And Dan talked about setting a tent up at the soccer game, and I'm like, I don't think it's a tent with donuts for people to come to you. I think it's you and somebody, I don't know, a board member, me, somebody, walking down the line, introducing themselves. It's taking what the feedback was and mirroring it.
And
You
I think
know,
it's a postcard with a scan that says, get more information here. And that brings you right to the Reimagining
Yeah.
GMS. So you can walk away with a
Here's your
business
QR
card.
code, yeah.
Yeah, here's the QR and boom, go look at that. And there's comments. I think there's still a comment section that people can comment on the
Yep.
page, right?
There's an email link.
There's an
to it for
email link, yeah.
suggestions or-
Email link.
So they can
Questions.
comment in questions and anything they're seeing. I mean, I kind of considered that stuff more to be the PR aspect of things that we were going to get into as we get closer to March, but there's no reason we can't do it now. We should.
March will be here real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, it's gonna fly.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is it'll help shape additional conversation prior to March that I think is really important, right? Because again, I'd like to get to a point where we could flush out all of the real concerns
Right.
that are based off of real information. So, yeah, I think doing it sooner is good.
The question I do see coming up, and this relates to GMS and then also relates to CHS, that repeatedly, and I know we've talked about it in passing, but there is a general question that comes out in terms of why haven't we considered sending out our CHS students to other districts, to Alburn, to Londonderry, to Manchester, and putting GMS basically in the high school, and not having a high school anymore. And we've talked about it,
Well, it's GMS to LMS and LMS to the high school.
Yeah, you'd have to
Okay,
do it that way.
regardless.
To be clear.
Yeah, regardless. But yeah, it's getting rid of the high school in town that was built, 20 years ago and
Yeah.
needed 20 years ago and being said we don't need it anymore. And so I think having an affirmative answer to that with research behind it and being able to say Hudson can't take our students, or Londonderry is full and can't take our students, or whatever the reasons are that we've said that this isn't viable,
Yeah.
I think needs to be on that page as
And I
well.
think
Because that seems to be the new renovate and
I've-
combine them
I've heard-
together.
I've heard that one too. It's
I'd like
moving.
to add to that, a cost component. You know, if
Yeah.
we're not educating our students in-house, we're paying tuition
Yep.
and transportation to go to
Yep.
those other high
Yep.
schools. And above and beyond the transportation that we already pay for our middle school
Absolutely.
student and
Yeah.
elementary students.
Yeah,
So-
the other thing, yeah, in terms of cost, I mean, I think that's the hardest thing for people to
Right.
wrap their heads around right now is they're not, I think people want to see this option, right? Because there's also this mistaken belief that there's the option that costs $0 and then there's the option that costs $40 million, right? There's no,
There's
like,
no
there,
zero
like,
dollar
there's totally an option that's just, that costs nothing, which is not accurate. But the other thing that people are having trouble equating is what that actually means in their tax dollars. You know, I've got people saying, oh, if we get a new school, my taxes are going to go up $2,000 a year.
I saw 5,000 on
Yeah,
Facebook.
and so people are, and understandably so, like, I understand people, they can't make sense of what the
tax
we need
rates
to,
and
we need
what-
to make it clear, like, this is what this actually means for you. But I do agree that those other options too. And also just being cognizant of thinking that other towns want to just absorb your problem that was a conversation when I'll never forget someone talking about the fire truck purchase, and it was, well, you know, we can rely on mutual aid from other towns. And then there was a question about, like, okay, but so we have to provide mutual aid to these towns. I was like, what are we doing providing mutual aid to these towns? And it was like, wait a second, that's
how
not
it
the way the
works.
world works. Like, you can't just say, hey, we don't feel like dealing with this, so can you please inherit our problem? We would like to just throw this your way. This isn't like private university systems where they're like, hey, we're happy to get this tuition money. Not everyone has the bandwidth to do that. So I think we also need to know that too.
So the other piece to add to this is we're talking about it from a financial angle, so we can answer those numbers financially, right?
It's the
It's
educational
not hard to get
impact.
the numbers. It's quality of education also.
Right.
Right.
So what is it that our community expects? And, you know, the example I used, we were talking about it in an admin team meeting, and I said, at Campbell High School, there are 5 people on the basketball team, boys or girls. And they're all from Campbell. And they have banners and trophies in the gym, right? If you go to Pinkerton, there's still 5 people on the basketball team. And how many of them will be from Campbell? I'll tell you the answer, probably none. And so what is it that you want, right? So what we have built is a great little community school. It's all our kids. We have experiences that might cost, when you do the math out, you might be able to save a couple $1,000s if you go to Pinkerton or if you go to Alvern. But you're no longer going to have a Campbell, and you're no longer going to have that experience. You know, we put on last year The Wizard of Oz, and we had 80 kids participating in that.
More than that.
What's the number?
District-wide?
It's like
Yeah.
120 or something.
120. I stand corrected. 120 kids, all, by the way, from Litchfield. Am I right on that one?
Yes, you are.
Okay. And, you know, again, if they did The Wizard of Oz in one of those other 2 communities, how many of those students would be Litchfield kids participating?
I do
So,
think,
you know,
unfortunately,
there's value to that.
I do think, unfortunately, that the population that's probably in support of that, and I don't have data to back this up, but I would venture to guess that it's the majority of people that don't have kids that would be more pro moving
Yeah.
the kids out of town, right? It's
I would agree with
because that really is truly about dollars and cents. I don't think that there's a single person in this town that's saying, you know, I just don't like kids, so I want to just like vote for something terrible for the kids, right? Like, I don't think there's a single person. I think that the people that are vehemently opposed to some of the things that really would benefit the kids, it's truly just based on money, and that's an understandable concern, right? Especially for someone on a fixed income or something like that. I get that. So, you know, but I do think that if we can help kind of put some of those things on paper, because there is no free option, and those options may not even be viable options, right? And so we can sit here and talk about those, and the fact that we brought it up automatically now makes it a viable option that people are gonna say, well, you had that other option that you talked about, right? So,
But this is what's frustrating is that last time the combined GMS and LMS suggestion was made that we look into and research that resulted in 4 more. Well, we went from investigating 5 options to investigating 9 options. We did 4 additional ones. We said to people, if you have anything else, bring it to us now so we can investigate it all at the same time, because otherwise we are just literally responding to new ideas
Yep.
after the fact, after we've already spent the time and effort to vet out and decide and make recommendations on the other ones. And
Right.
so, you know, again, I understand looking at some of the Campbell numbers, someone may look at that and say, okay, well, the population's dwindling and there aren't a lot of class options in our view, whoever it is, and so therefore ship them out. It's not that simple.
Right.
Have you also, and you may have all discussed this, but when you pivot on things like this, right? So we went through a whole process, which I did participate in, which was the reimagining GMS from the beginning.
Right.
Went from the very beginning of, here's all the options, let's work as a community to figure out. And when I went to that, the thing I liked was that there was no presupposed notion of what was going to happen, right? It was truly, here's all the options, let's look at all of them. And so that process did run. And there was money invested in that process, right? There were people there that were paid to be there. Has anyone talked about what the cost was to circle back and add in these things that are, you know, looking again at the, you know, merging the two schools? Not that that was not worth doing. I think that any option is worth looking at.
We approved a dollar amount.
Yeah, we did.
We
Ten-
did.
We approved 10 grand to do it.
Yep, and so they did do that.
And so people are aware, though, that like,
Yeah.
you know, when you throw these things out, which is fine, right? But you do have to pay. It's not free every time we like
Right.
come up with a new idea and say, you know.
No, but we're also saying that we hear you, and we're also interested in what that output is.
I agree, but I just want to make sure that
There's a
at
cost
the end of the year, when people are looking at how much money was spent on different things, that
There is a cost.
there is a cost with that. I think it's perfectly fine. I would rather come to the right solution, right? So that $10,000 is probably well spent but if it's throwing new things out just for the idea of throwing new things out with the hope that the project won't go forward and we're going to just settle on nothing, nothing's not an option.
The other component to the whole shifting of schools and sending high school kids out, right, potentially is, all right, we moved elementary kids to middle, or to LMS, and middle school kids to CHS. We're still gonna need to renovate
Retrofit,
Yeah.
yeah.
some of the buildings here. Like, all right, so now LMS is our new elementary, and they need a playground, right?
Yeah.
There's other things. Well, but see,
Exactly.
but these are like parking would be an issue, right? There's other
Room
challenges with that.
sizes and, yeah.
Right. so-
Bathrooms that would have to go into.
Bathrooms, right, there's other logistical things, that it's not just, like, there's renovation costs that will have to occur as well
Absolutely.
as part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point.
But it does become, when you try to boil that down for people, it does become really hard to, you know what I mean? If you're just someone that's coming in from the outside that's saying, I care about this because I care about my tax money.
Well, so let's, I mean, back in the napkin math, right? 400 kids at 18.5 a year, right, is 7.4 million, right? So if we send all high school kids out at $18,500 per student, it's,
Transportation.
well, plus transportation, I'll call it $400,000, knowing today's rates and knowing it's for 400 kids, not 1,200 kids, right? So you're at 7.8 million, and that only goes up. Those costs only go up, right? In addition to that, you have your one-time fixed costs for all the renovations, right? So you're probably at 11 million, 12 million for the first year, and then you're at 8 million in growing every year thereafter.
In addition to having a budget for
But you
your
need, but you
K
need
through
to
8.
offset that, right? You need to offset that with, now we're running one less school, right? Staff, right? And you have the other balance there too.
Yeah, we have
So
to
it
show
would be
both
an
sides
interesting
of it.
model to take a look at.
And is that what parents want for their kids in Litchfield? We moved to Litchfield because we liked the fact that it was a small town with small schools, with, you know,
With its own
small
high school.
staffs, with its own high school where our kids would get, we felt, a better education than they would, or, you know, they'd get more attention. They'd benefit from having a smaller school.
Mr. Shoemaker, you said this, right? Publicly, like, there's no reason why we can't have a great school system in this town.
No, not
It's
at all.
actually ludicrous to be this size town and struggle so hard to try to make your school system great.
So
There are towns and cities with many bigger
I
challenges.
think the
than we have.
board entirely will agree with you, right?
Yep. But, you know, I would be upset if we closed Campbell because we moved here for that reason. You know what I mean? So, you know, I hear what everybody is saying about the possibility of it, and yes, it could save money, but for me, it's not worth that trade-off.
People also equate property values just to taxes. Like, it's, my property value only matters because that's what my taxes are. And I think that it would really behoove people to also consider their property value as the value of one of their largest investments typically. And if you start to mess with your school system, particularly something as substantial as outsourcing your high school, that can drastically impact your property value for the negative, especially if, for example, one of the options would be Manchester. If you want to, sending your kids to a large city versus a small town, that's a big difference, and that will definitely negatively impact people's property values. Which, again, if you're solely focused on taxes, maybe that's
Maybe you
your
don't
goal.
mind.
But
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, the majority of people that I've seen in my business that are benefiting from the increase of their property values, with they're older, they sold assets, they have money to live off of for the rest of their lives as a result of that. There are benefits to the older population too, and if you don't recognize that, get a financial advisor because it's worth looking at.
I think you make a good point. You look at communities like Hooksett that sends to 3 or 4 different places, you totally lose the sense of community. I mean, because students on the north end are going to Manchester, south end going to, it's like, what is that? Versus now, they all are in the Campbell community. So what's the value to that? You have to ask that.
And also looking forward, right? It may seem like a great solution now, but we have to think about solutions that are going to be long-term, right? I think that's
20,
been the
30
big
years.
problem that the town's had, is that we don't carry forward solutions that are beneficial into the long term. And are we going to regret that choice in 10 or 15 years? I guess we could ask these guys.
Hey, guys.
What's up?
Grab a chair.
Yeah, add a chair on the end, I guess.
Sorry.
Sorry.
We went to double overtime.
Hey, how'd you do?
We
got the
Nice.
You got the win? All right, good. Here's a written agenda. You can slide over to them.
I guess I'm kind of interested to know, like, can we ask them that? Like, is that?
Yeah?
Yep, you're
So-
going right on the spot.
So, right on the spot. So we're talking about the idea of if the town decided to just outsource high school to other towns, basically what they used to, they used to go to Hudson, right? Probably well before, was that before they were
Before any of
born?
either one
Before
of
you
them
were
were
born?
even a twinkle in Dad's eye.
So what would that be like for you as students? Like if all of a sudden now you were going to another town for high school?
I mean, personally, I don't think I'd be a fan of that. I feel like it's like, I like the thought of like everyone from one town like going to one high school, and like even like sports teams, like you grow up with your friends like playing on this team, and like it's good to just keep everyone together.
I'll say I was watching this before when I came here. I was listening to what Mr. Jetty was saying, the idea of you're representing Campbell, and we talk about a lot on our football team how it's something that you get to represent a town, you get to represent everybody there, and not a lot of people get that because you have people going to Pinkerton representing all these different places, other schools, Bishop Girton. Like, I think being from such a small knit community and having a school there, it's different. It's a different environment. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Anything else on the community forum? All right. Moving into, again, putting you on the spot. Do you guys have a report for tonight or
So-
anything to share? Are you just here to listen? What's up?
we didn't have time to make a presentation. We have a few things. So I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to talk about the open house first.
All right, yeah, so tomorrow we're having like an open house for all like the parents to like meet with the teachers, and that'll be from 6 to 8, and yeah, there's just gonna be like people meeting. You want to go homecoming?
And then we had homecoming this last week, so we don't have like actual numbers for it, but apparently, like from hearing from all the staff, it was our biggest homecoming event ever since
Right.
like
Oh, wow.
for a while. Like Mr. McDonald was saying, the most attendance ever, and it was all student led. Like from the music, we had a kid being the DJ, and we had
Nice.
like his own stereo system. It was awesome, and we had a pep rally too, which was really good. In our dress up days, there was a lot of participation, so it was just good to see a lot of school spirit.
And then for sports, all of our homecoming games, we won all of them, which is awesome. Oh yeah.
That's really it.
Very good.
Yeah, even the rain didn't dampen it for football.
It dampened it, but
Okay, it actually
still a great
it
event.
didn't dampen the
Drenched.
spirit
Yeah.
of it, though you were physically soaked. Anything else from you guys? Any questions for our student reps? All right, seeing none, we'll jump back into new business, and we have policy updates. Okay, I'll just kind of briefly intro this to say that policy committee spent quite a few hours going through each and every one of these policies, because within each policy, there are references to other policies. So it's not as simple as saying, we're gonna take these three and we're gonna bring them before the board, because there are other links and other policies that we need to, we're not only trying to update the lettering or the numbering of them to have it match with NHSBA, but we're also updating actual policies that either haven't been addressed or looked at in a lot of time for some of them. So with that, we have gone through and vetted each of these as a policy committee. We are in support of these. And that is, you can see them all, I won't list them out, but KVA. But EB is here for the second read. I think that is the only one that's here for a second read. The rest of them would all be for a first read tonight.
Okay. So these are new policies that were created, as it says in the agenda?
These were policies that were either out of date, misnumbered, had been divided, and are now, or had been put together and are now separately addressed.
Okay.
And that were either required or recommended by NHSBA.
So as an example, as we get through the adoption of a few of these, I would also anticipate the removal of a couple of our like IGBJ or whatever it was, right? Which is now being replaced by 3 policies that are on this list or whatever it was.
Okay. For me, it would be helpful to have those notes. I know you guys are doing the work in policy committee, but for me just to read this policy is recommended and was created to comply with NHSBA. I'd just like to know, did we have a policy already? Is it a rename? Is it?
We can go through each one of those. I mean, I have it all.
That would be great. And then I wouldn't have to ask the question and I could vote to approve them all.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so first up is
KFA.
Who, can I just ask, who has to grant me access? I have access to half of
It's,
these?
Kayla.
Okay.
Yeah.
I clicked the request access, but we'll see if, I don't know if that goes.
I did too, but, and I got her early this morning though, so she was able to
Oh, okay, cool.
grant access. She's pretty
Still
quick
not able
usually.
to get in?
I have like half of them I can access.
I printed them out because I'm old, Matt, if you want to see it.
Do you want a copy?
KFA
That's
is a new
KFA.
policy that's
Okay.
recommended by NHSBA. It's not required, it's recommended. But it's a policy that in standalone, we did not have prior.
So it's a new thing that was created.
I'm not saying we didn't have a policy that covered conduct of school property, but it was rolled into other policies.
Okay.
There were like student behavior policies. I think
Right.
this is a more inclusive one that would cover visitors to a sporting event, for
Okay.
example.
Okay. So would this replace those other policies then?
It should be seen more as like a partner to those.
Okay.
And again, as Andrew said, at some
Yeah.
point, we will start to have policies that are removed
Yeah.
as being redundant as we go along.
And part of this is we're also trying to be sensitive to being compliant with our policies, right, as we should always be.
Right, and
but-
that's fine.
But we recognize that with some of these being adopted, right, it may create a disconnect in what we're compliant with,
And it creates a lot of work,
and it creates a lot of work.
Right.
whether it be for our
And
IT director or for
Right.
HR
And
or.
I certainly don't
Yay.
need to add to the work of the policy committee. I just, not having that context.
That's a good call out, I agree. So in future
Maybe we can do a summary.
agendas, yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's
Or-
a summary, or
Just link it to the old
I
one
can
or
link it,
something.
or I can just put a comment right next to each one of these.
Yeah,
Right, so
or
it's clear.
even in the, do a report, a policy committee report,
Yeah.
where it's just a breakdown of these were created to, I don't know, just not having that context
Yeah.
made me question why we're working on each one.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to.
Let's start with EB, if you can.
Yep, I can. Motion to approve policy EB, Workplace Safety Program and Joint Loss Management Committee as a second read.
I will second.
Any questions on EB?
So I guess to address your question on this, right, EB, we did have as a policy. However, it was labeled as EBB, right? EBB is also a required policy, and we'll have that down the road.
Okay, great.
This
Thank
is,
you.
this is an example where previous boards had coupled,
Yeah.
Yes.
and now we're decoupling.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
And the other comment I would make about EB is, if you look at Section A, it's asking for workplace safety program. So Holly will be meeting with Primex to develop that, because that's not something that's current and fresh, so that needs to be done. So, the policy change is triggering an impact.
Right. So I guess my question is, if we're working to align with the NHSBA policy manual, do we have to approve each policy for a rename or splitting it or consolidating it? Or can the board just authorize the policy committee to do the work with those policies and then vote on them as a whole once they're complete?
I think where we landed on is if it's just a category change, if it was EBB and now
Right.
is EB, we're not gonna see those as a board, right?
Right, but we're seeing this one.
Well, this is different because it has changes to it.
Okay.
But there are other examples where it's just a category change, like a
Right.
numbering change.
And those I don't feel like I need to review unless we're reviewing the content of the policy.
If there are core policy changes as a result,
Yeah.
that's what's being put in front of the board.
Tina, I think the other piece that complicates it, if you look in the policy manual, so at the end of each policy, there's a history
Right.
there. And from a legal point of view, if there were to be a claim, what was the policy at that point in time?
Okay.
So that's why I think
Got it.
we go through this exercise of
Okay.
making it really clear. That was the policy then, this is the
This
policy
is
now.
the date where we adopted it. Okay. All right.
I'm looking at this though, correct me if I'm wrong, the school district internet access for students, JICL, wasn't there a secondary school district internet access for staff that was approved in conjunction with this, and I don't see it on here unless I'm missing it?
Yeah, GBEF.
Yeah.
is Internet access for
We
staff.
approved, we went through and looked at that one, but it's not here on the agenda, so we
Did we
need,
approve that in the last meeting?
for policy, we did, because it was the same as the student district internet access for staff. Those were previously combined into one policy, and we separated it out in alignment with NHSBA. So as I'm sitting here looking down the list, we can still approve all of these for a first read, but we need to get, before we remove the IG, whatever that one is, we need to make sure that GEBF is approved at the same time.
Yeah, IIAE.
Yeah, I thank you.
Can I just understand process when you
It's crazy.
approve
Can we
for
just have a
first
minute?
read
Yep.
versus second? What are those, what is that actually?
First read is exactly that. We're looking at it. We're looking at the preliminary information. We look at every policy twice. We want to make sure everyone takes a look at it, understands it. Sometimes we make changes to it, so it'll be voted on as a first read with amendments. Sometimes we send it back and won't even approve it as a first read and say, we don't like those changes, send it back. So first read is sort of just that first read. Does everything look okay? Second read is really, that's when it becomes law or policy.
The other piece is it gives the public a kind of notice that you're in the
Chance.
middle of this, so that it's
Yeah.
just more opportunity for public weigh in.
Transparency.
So I went back to the agenda from the 6th of September, and you're right, GBEF was there. I don't
Yeah.
know why it's not on this one, so
Right,
we'll,
so we just need to make sure we add it
Yep,
for next time. But again, I just happened to glance through and I'm like, wait a
Yeah,
minute,
that's a
these
good
were a
call.
pair.
Yep.
So, you made your motion to approve for a second read and you seconded, so we're talking about EB now. So are there any questions as this is the final read for EB?
No.
Seeing none, all those in favor of approving policy EB as a second read, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Aye.
401.
Catch up eventually.
And then I would like to make a motion to approve policies KFA, ECA, EG, JICL, JLCJ, and are we approving JJA? These are recommended. I'm gonna say to approve JJA and JJA-R as first reads.
Second.
I didn't see any comments or questions within the policies.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So do you, at this point, do you ask questions about any of the policies? You do? I have a question on ECA about use of the schools after hours by community groups. I guess from a security standpoint, right, it's if they're the last people in the building, right, other than this making them responsible for issues, so I guess from like an insurance perspective, that's great. From a security perspective, is there more that can or should be done to make sure that the schools are secured between the time that community members may be using the school and kids are going back into the schools?
So we did have that, it's funny, we had that conversation during our policy meeting. I think part of the struggle right now is staffing.
Staffing on weekends.
It's hard on weekends to have someone come into the, like, so if it's basketball. Basketball's at LMS and having practice, and they're there on Saturday, to have a custodian or an administrator or whoever be the one that has to go in to confirm shutting down, locking the doors and whatnot. We put in here, that's why we added the language whenever feasible. The goal would be to have someone there, but right now it's just not in the cards with us being down so many different custodial staff. Usually midweek, because they're already in the building, there is a sweep of the building, is what we were told after the fact, that, you know, they make sure all the doors are closed and security is set. But it's the weekends that are a little bit tougher. It's not to say it never happens, it's just to say it's harder to say that it'd be a requirement.
Okay. And I think the other piece is, Dave sent an email today. I think we're down 8 people today in his department.
Oh, God.
8 people. I believe we have no custodian to high school this evening because of injury and open vacant positions. So, you know, unfortunately, we can write policy that is more demanding, but it may result in denial of people accessing the building because we just don't have the personnel. So it's you know, so far, again, small, tight-knit community, there are limited people who have access to the LMS gym, and it hasn't been an issue. So everybody is sort of taking on that caretaker role in a small community to make it work. But the reality is we're pinched for staff right now.
Gotcha.
And I think he let me know that after I asked 2 things of him.
I think so. Yeah, I think that was the order of
I
things.
was like, hey, can you give me an update on this? Can you give me an update on that? And then all of a sudden it was, I'm down 8 people. And I was like, got it.
That was my only question.
I did post a comment on the agenda, not within the policy itself, about the eligibility for co-curricular activities. And you replied that we're just changing the name at this point, not evaluating the policy. But I would like to, at some point, bring that back to be evaluated, the language in it, just so that I better understand what it entails.
And this is where we kind of went into Pandora's box a bit, because as we are going through and there are these links to policies such as student co-curricular activities, it's a lengthy policy, it impacts a lot of students, and it would require a lot of updates. So we were looking more to make it in line with the NHSBA policy in terms of title, but put it on the list to bring back when we get through the required and recommended.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily off the radar, but it's one of the ones that we said, we're only gonna do this for now. Let us get through the rest of these required and
I see.
recommended, and then we'll get back, because it's a very lengthy policy with a lot of detail, and it would any changes on it would impact handbooks, students, and so we
We
wanna,
wanna do that between school years.
Sure.
Sure.
So our focus was very much on the NHSBA required policies, and as a result of those required policies in the spider web that's within,
This came up.
there are several that are recommended, but as a part of the required policy. So
Okay.
what you're seeing here is both required, yes, but also recommended because of the connections.
Okay. All right.
it is, it's a, like I said, Pandora's box. Once
Yep.
we open it, you are down the rabbit hole of,
Oh,
And
I
it's been
know.
opened.
I know. I think, you know, like you agreed to the, just having a little spiel about each one would be great,
Yeah.
where it came from.
absolutely.
All right, so do you have a second?
We already motioned and we seconded.
Okay.
Any other discussion on be 1, 2, 3, 4, nope, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 policies that are up for first read.
Six.
Just,
1, 2,
I combined I
okay.
separated out JAA and AR, but yes.
Tina, your comment is in section 2, the requirements of passing at least 3 credits.
Yeah.
Just so I don't lose track of that, where exactly is that? Is that
In JJA.
A? And so I went to that and I
Yeah.
looked for section 2.
It's down on page.
I found it too. Eligibility.
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
CHS academic eligibility.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if I was reading that right. At least 3.0 academic credits in the high school quarter prior to participation. It just seemed low to me.
The only thing, and that's why I said we need to check the math, because
Right.
some of them are half credits.
Right.
So
No, I definitely want to check, and I want to check with Josh and Jake and make sure that
Yeah.
that's a reasonable and yet not too low of a bar.
Yep. So I
Well-
think that's up for discussion when we bring that
Yeah.
policy back for a more thorough review.
And I think that's actually driven by NHIAA.
Yeah.
So there's like a minimum that they have. We can make it higher, but I
Well,
suspect.
it's, down below, there's, for LMS requirements, they can't have, I forget what it was. It was something like, they can't have any failing grades. So it,
Wow, that's a shift.
yeah.
Sorry, say that again, Tina?
So for the high schools, the high school eligibility, and I know we weren't meant to get into this discussion tonight. It says freshmen, sophomores, and juniors have to pass at least 3.0 academic credits in the quarter prior to participation in co-curricular activities. So if a student is taking 7 classes or 5 classes and has classes 7 blocks of an 8-block schedule, do they only need to be passing 3 of those in order to be eligible to play? You know what
Yeah.
that's kind of where my question is.
Well, I also want to revisit that language because
Yeah.
when it says per quarter.
Quarter, we
Yeah,
don't
the
assign
credits are
credits
annual,
per
right?
quarter.
So I
Yeah.
think what we're dealing with is antiquated language
Language.
that we have,
Yeah.
that needs to be updated. So
Yeah.
thank you. That's why I want to, if we can get that fixed, we need to get it fixed. So I'll look into that and get
Okay,
back to you.
thank you. I just, yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second for a first read. Is everyone ready to vote? All those in favor of approving policy KFA, ECA, EG, JICL, JLCJ, JJA, JJA-R for a first read, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Aye.
401. Phew. Alphabet soup, I tell ya.
Always is.
I make a motion to have a new numbering system for policy,
Yeah.
starting with policy number 1.
All right, and then next we're moving into the delegates assembly that is on October 14th. Ms. Harrison will be representing us at that, and she has asked us to look over some of the proposed resolutions, the statement of beliefs manual, the continuing resolutions from 2022, as well as any bylaw changes.
There's a lot this year.
There's a lot,
There
yeah,
was
I
a
read
lot
through, yeah.
Yeah. So typically what we do is we just kind of go through and you let me know how you'd like me to vote. So these would be resolutions that the NHSBA would adopt based on the voting delegates from school boards all around New Hampshire, as what they would go to provide testimony for or support when they're in legislative hearings. So we could, if you guys have had a chance to look through them, or if you,
I have had some look through them.
I like the one on building aid.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So typically, NHSBA publishes, as you saw, they publish their recommendation, and
We follow that.
usually we follow that. I mean, I happen to agree with them on most of the cases and with their rationale on most of them, so,
The one I didn't agree with,
Yeah.
that they said not support, is actually number 10 on page 4.
okay?
Right, where the proposed resolution was to include an estimate of actual food service costs for the upcoming year. Like, I felt like this one made a lot of sense.
It does, I think, too.
And they're saying not support for a variety of reasons. But I think the spirit of that is something I'm behind.
Well, they talked about there are other costs that you can't estimate in advance, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
hard.
they
It's,
knocked that
well,
down.
we go through this every year. It's very
Right.
hard to budget for food service,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had, when I looked at this one, I kind of wished they had proposed alternative
Yeah.
language for it. I mean, they don't obviously like the language that's here, but I wish it was one of the ones that they propose
Right.
alternative language for. I'm not sure how else to propose it, to draft it, though.
Right. Yeah, they want them to include things
And
that
I don't
can't
think
be.
there's no process to edit this.
Not
It's
really,
take it or
no.
leave it, right? Yeah.
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 So what would you like me to say on that one? You want me to?
I'd say good luck.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, look, I mean, it is what it is. I just think that this is one that makes a lot of sense. I just,
Okay.
Is there a reason why they can't do this anyway? I guess that's my question. So if we, as the Litchfield School District, wanted to have an estimate of the actual food service budget, is that something we could request? And I know Doug just walked back in, so I'm
Yeah.
hesitating to
See,
put him right on the spot, but,
We could
doing that a lot tonight.
I know, you walk in and bam. But is that something that we need a resolution, to support a resolution for in the state, right?
I think that for our town, right, the value I see in it is if, and this is going back to our meeting,
Yeah.
whenever it was, a couple of months ago anyways, right, or maybe it was a month ago, where if there is a deficit, do we need a budgeted line item in our plan, in our budget, to cover that deficit, as opposed to now being this year, we don't have it in our budget, and oh, by the way, we're projecting 100K in the red,
Yeah.
Right.
right? That's where I see the benefit to our town for this one. So Doug, can we add it to our budget?
Or can we request it as a board?
Can-
Without necessarily violating state law? I don't know why this
Right.
wouldn't, I don't know. Raymond School Board obviously feels it's necessary to have NHSBA advocate for this.
So I think what they're getting at, because we can add a line into our budget. We know we're gonna have a deficit, we can just add a
Okay.
food service assistance line and have it in there, right? This is about the default budget, so.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, so in that case, when you're calculating that amount, you know, there are laws and rules about what you can do,
Okay, yeah.
What you can include in
right?
it.
So
Right.
they're saying they would like to, look, we can predict. We ran a deficit last year, we're predicting a deficit
Yep.
next year, and we like
Should be in default.
to be able to
Right.
include that in the default.
That I
And
get, okay.
Yeah.
so then if you look at what the board of directors' recommendations are, they're saying, look, you should be more broad about
Right.
any uncertain costs
Yeah.
when you're calculating the default. Maybe the overall default rules are too narrow and tight, and you should be able to add a cost of inflation multiplier or, you know, whatever. They're saying, come back with a resolution that's a little bit broader than just food
There
service.
have been times when we've proposed a resolution on the floor that wasn't, we were too late to submit it, but we proposed a resolution, it was about manifest hardships. And the body of the NHSBA membership voted to support that resolution. So it could be that there is a resolution to that effect that's broader, brought forward by the Raymond School Board on the floor of that. So I'm happy to support that.
So explain how this, so you guys go and vote on this at the event?
Yep.
And is the NHSBA required then to do what you,
They basically,
Voted on? So
yeah, they adopted
we don't
this
have to
as-
agree to this, so you can kind of overturn their opinion on the floor.
Right, so they make a recommendation.
So if enough school
And-
districts agree with Raymond, even though they've
Right.
said we don't support it, if enough school districts
Yeah.
say, we want you to take a position on this,
Yep.
they will.
So I can vote in support if that's kind of the leaning of the board.
That's my preference, but.
Okay. I think it makes sense.
I'm all for any steps. I agree with the rationale in terms of broadening what's included in a default budget, because again, having been the person who presented that slide at
Yes.
deliberative last year and trying to compare what we could include with a default versus what was included in Article 1, there were a fair number of differences, which is why we were asking the town not to support the default budget and to support Article 1. One step at a time, and maybe it's starting with food services, and maybe next year
It'll
it's,
broaden it a little
it's
bit, yeah.
whatever we need it to be, but, and maybe we make a resolution.
Yeah. Okay, I'll support that one.
I find it interesting, if you look at the others, the board of directors proposed alternative language.
language, right.
They didn't on this one. They
That's
they
what I
threw it-
said,
They
yeah.
kicked it back, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
why.
Just a hard rejection.
Yeah.
So for most of these, I mean, personally, I support the alternative language that the NHSBA,
As do I.
they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There weren't any that I had an issue with the alternative language that was proposed, so I am comfortable with supporting the alternative.
Same. Do you need a motion for that?
Did you ever?
I was just curious what your thoughts on 12 were.
12.
It's rolling back up.
Almost there.
Responsibility and accountability of parents and guardians of students who do not conduct themselves according to local laws or school policies. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we're dealing with this as a timely matter in town. So I didn't know if anyone had any other thoughts on this. I thought that the proposed alternative resolution was a little bit watered down.
A little weak.
Yeah.
I think the rationale was because Monadnock was only looking to deal with, the primary intent was related to the truancy, more than necessarily any and all disruptive behavior.
But I think we have some disruptive behavior going on right now.
We do.
Right, and I think that this is, every time we hear about the disruptive behavior, I, for better or worse, chalk that up to, are you parenting well enough at home if your kid thinks it's okay to come into school and do some of these things? Obviously, there's a line between behavioral issues that are related to a special need or something versus a student who just doesn't respect the school and the staff. But I don't know, I read the proposed resolution and I tended to like it a little bit better than the alternative.
And the alternative is urges.
Right.
Okay, what does that actually mean?
To clarify responsibilities, obligation, and rights. So,
That's essentially a pass if they don't like something.
Well, and it was, and the alternative is focused on, clarifying the rights and obligations of school board and districts. I liked the aspect of the
Parents are
accountability
responsible.
piece, right? I think we lack that quite a bit.
okay. So, what do you think? All in favor, support that proposed resolution? That's 12?
I mean, obviously I am.
Yeah, I would
Yeah, that
think.
works.
Yeah?
You gotta put some onus back on the parents for that.
Yeah.
They basically took the parents off the hook with
Yeah.
the other one.
That happens a lot. All right, anything else? All right, thank you for that.
A lot of feedback from Manchester.
Yeah. And then the bylaw changes I just looked over,
Yeah, that
it's
was,
the separation with the National School Board Association.
which I get their point, like 20 or so states have done that, right? But it doesn't logically make sense to me.
Yeah,
about
I think
why.
it was a lot, the tone of the letter that was sent from the National School Board Association on behalf of their members, was not agreed with by some of the member boards. So it was I think it was a gun, I feel like it was a weapons. There was a letter sent over action of the legislature, I can't find it right now. But it had to do with Second Amendment rights and, being New Hampshire and knowing how, our state feels about that. The NHSBA felt that they should have at least been notified that this letter was being sent on their behalf, and they weren't. So there were several member boards that disagreed.
Yeah.
And so they decided to separate from the National School Board Association.
Does that weaken our position, though, if we're not part of that group?
Not that I know of, because, I don't know, I feel like NHSBA does a good job covering New Hampshire, the New Hampshire school boards. National School Board, I think School Board Association is tricky because different areas have different needs and serve different populations and different, mindsets and viewpoints and perspectives, so.
The governance and recommendations that might be given
Right.
to someone, to a school in California may be very, very different than
Right.
the recommendations.
Oh, yes.
But, I mean, is what you're referring to also like the,
From a
sort of
lobbying
like,
perspective,
like a
whatever.
federal lobbying
Yeah.
perspective? Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, if they're not gonna run things by the boards like New Hampshire, who care, I tend to stand behind that.
I do too. Okay, anything else?
Nope, thanks for representing the
Thank you.
district.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you for
it's
going.
Always a blast.
All right, opening the floor up to school board comments.
I mean, I think for me, all the comments really we talked about was the forum. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really was the big,
Yeah,
the news of the day.
thank you.
You do.
I crossed something out. I don't know. I
You're
just,
making edits, man.
I think I fixed it.
Done with that.
I was just clicking on where we were. Put a big line right through it, wiped it out.
And so no school board comments. I did want to just say homecoming was great. I thought everybody did a great job with the event, the dance. I thought it was from what I could see, well attended. So it's always nice to see the community coming together and the kids coming together. So not that you guys are kids, but I still think you're kids. So good job on that. And seeing nothing else, we will move into community input. This is the part of the agenda where the community can provide input to the board relative to non-agenda items. So or agenda items, whatever their preference is there anyone here that would like to provide any community input to the board?
Literally 30 minutes ahead of schedule tonight.
I was just saying,
Why are you saying it out loud?
Really? Way to go,
welcome
Andrew.
everyone.
Stop it! Don't jinx it! Okay.
Bad juju.
Okay, seeing that, I'm gonna close community input. We have 3 signatures on the manifest, so that is all set. Were there any questions on the manifest?
Do you have any questions about manifest items, just in general, or?
Not yet.
I think you need to sit down with Doug and
Yeah.
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 get the
Plinth
tutorial. All right, seeing it, we're at the end of the agenda. We will go ahead and move into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, which involves the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him, unless the employee affected, 1, has a right to a meeting, and 2, requests that that meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted. B, the hiring of any person as a public employee. C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely adversely affect the reputation of any person other than a member of the body or agency itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. And then D through L, you can see the citation. I believe for tonight, we are going to be talking about A, as well as C. Am I correct? What do you consider the staff issue?
I think it's C. I don't think.
Okay, then I don't think we have an A then. Okay, then there's no A. We are going into non-public session based off of letter C. Is there a motion to go into non-public?
So made.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of going into non-public, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? 5-0-0. Thank you very much, public, for attending, for coming tonight. Our next meeting is October 18th. As always, please send us emails. Please come and attend our meetings and provide community input, because what you think is important, and we want to hear from you. So thank you very much, and have a good night.